What's going on, guys? Coach Matrix here from my Performance Center, Director of Strength Conditioning. Today we're going to talk about 5 strategies we can use to make sure we optimize and manage weight room flow for our team or small group sessions. Right? Of course, this is very important because we want to make sure that we maximize time, space, and resources. As we know, we only have certain amounts of time as our athletes. We want to make sure we maximize that time, make sure that their efforts aren't wasted, make sure they actually are getting better so we can transfer our skills to the field courts or wherever else they may need to be. So tip number 1 is going to be communicate expectations very clearly. And this means covering the small details on a very extensive basis. So for example, on day 1, we'll usually make sure we tell our athletes what on time means, right? So we may always make sure they're punctual. We tell them where to put their belongings. We tell them where to meet up for the warm-up / briefing area. We tell them how we're going to group them up and what to do if a member of their group is absent, right? We're covering all those small details to make sure that we're actually maximizing time in future and make sure we are actually a well-oiled machine. And of course, we also talk about how feedback will be provided, how to respond to feedback and criticism, that kind of thing, and then what expectations to take from feedback so they can apply it into their own workouts. Okay, so that'd be tip number 1. Tip number 2 would be to have as many preset workstations or lanes as possible. Now, we have the luxury here, we have multiple full structured power racks, different pieces of equipment and turf space. So we'll have different athletes at the same time as our teams. So what we'll try to do is create preset workstations and lanes where they can complete their workout regimen all within the constraints of that workout lane, right? So they have a little bit of turf space, wall space, they have a full power rack, and they also have a bench and a little bit of floor space. And what we'll try to do is put the equipment that's needed for the whole workout all within kind of arm's reach. So that way when they're transitioning from series to series or block to block, our athletes can simply just grab the tools they need all within that workstation versus having to crisscross across the room and interfere with other workstations or flows. So that way there's not too much chaos going on and it seems very well organized from there. The third tip when it comes to how we create weight room flow is going to be utilizing supersets, right, and exercise pairings. So what we mean by that is if we have a big group, let's say we have groups, a team of like 12 to 15 or up to 20, all right, and they're working in groups of 3 or 4. Well, I order our exercise accordingly so that someone is always doing something. It's not taken away from the main work. So for example, if let's say our main lift of the series is going to be a back squat, okay, we'll have someone doing back squats, someone might be doing some sort of upper body accessory movement, some person might be doing a little bit of core work or mobility, right? Or the 4th person could be spotting the person doing the squat. Either way, we're utilizing exercise order and pairing so that everyone in that group is working or contributing to the main effort. That way that there's not too much sitting around waiting, especially when it comes to like heavier lifts or more explosive efforts that require more rest time. Those extra fillers in those pairings can help burn up some of that rest time without taking too much fatigue away from the actual work that we have to do. Okay, so that really helps if we order exercise a certain way, and that could also help with flow. So everyone knows where to go, what order to do it in, what role they have when they're doing that exercise, and it keeps flow going for our teams and our groups. The 4th tip would be making sure you actually pick appropriate equipment. And what I mean by this is that if you have groupings, right, 3 or 4 people in a group, and you program, a bunch of exercises that all need a barbell, you might only have access to one barbell. So I would encourage you to pick exercises that use different varieties of equipment. So for example, in our groups, we'll typically have like a barbell movement, a dumbbell movement, and then bands or some body weight type movement or accessory work along that nature. Reason being is because it helps someone to go on the main work. They always have the tools they need and we never run out of equipment. That might lead to a backup or clog where people are waiting for certain pieces of equipment, right? Like there's only so many dumbbells, there's only so many power blocks, there's only so many barbells and plates. So at the end of the day, we want to make sure that all the equipment that we use is programmed accordingly. So that way there's never going to be too much waiting around or sitting around. We want to make sure that all the tools we have are appropriate, and it also makes that programming aspect a little more important to make sure that our time is still optimized and no one's waiting around for a piece of equipment. Finally, tip number 5 is group your athletes accordingly. So for example, we'll typically go, you could do this a bunch of ways, but we'll typically go by height or relative strength levels, right? So you have like a bunch of athletes, you might say, okay, this group of 4 might be the taller group, this group of before, maybe the more relative strong group. And the reason for doing this is it'll save time during the sets where too many athletes have to either adjust the bar height, take off or add weights, go back and get new dumbbells. If you kind of group based on those basic body type anthropometrics, you'll actually save yourself a lot of time with people having to adjust the bars or accommodate or help everyone else do it. That can kill valuable time in a workout where time is limited, right? You could also group it up based on, as creative as you like. So for example, you might have a baseball team, you might group your pitchers together, and you might have your fielders together as well. That way, if they're doing two different things or two different variations, at least they're doing all the same thing. It saves them time from having to bounce back and forth. You could also do this with different types of sports, right? You might have like your contact sport athletes working in groups. You might have your jump sport athletes working in groups. You might have your throw-based athletes working in groups. So you can kind of group these up, whatever you see fit. But some of the good basic ones to start with are based on height and relative strength levels. Then you can kind of diversify from there. So those are your 5 tips you can use to manage weight room flow. With those 5 tips, you should be able to manage weight room flow pretty effectively to make sure you're maximizing time, space, and efforts of your athletes.